Is a clash of civilizations inevitable into the future between Islam and the West?
Yes. Some people say, in fact, there's recently been what's, I think, preposterously called a national intelligence estimate about this. Estimate is certainly the right word. It's not in any sense a finding. It's a piece of subjective impression mongering, but anyway, the finding, or the whatever the word I'm looking for, the estimate is that a great number of Muslims are annoyed by our policy, and that thus, and violently so, and thus we are, to a certain extent, a word I also distrust, less safe. Quite how safety is measured in this, or by what means it's estimated, is quite beyond me. I mean, it seems to me, if one asks a question like, does going to war make one more safe? One asks a question that is flat out incoherent, and will elicit, if asked, stupid answers, which is what we have been getting from our intelligence community in any case for the last 2 or 3 decades. However, let's say, all right, we should take care not to make enemies. Well, what care would we have to take? Let me give you the instance of Denmark. Small northern European democracy, multicultural, open-hearted, large immigrant population, no history of imperialism in the Middle East, spends most of its diplomatic efforts and money in the region on helping the Palestinians, has its embassies burned, its diplomatic immunity violated, in countries, by the way, in the capital cities of dictatorships that normally don't allow demonstrations of any kind. Danish embassies are put to the torch, random Danes and other Scandinavians who might look Danish are hunted down in the streets and killed. Danish diplomats are violated. A conscious, very well-organized attempt, supported by several leading Arab governments, is made by sanctions and boycotts to destroy the quite vulnerable Danish economy, and so on. And what is the ground of grievance here? That the Prime Minister of Denmark will not break Danish law by intervening to stop the publication of cartoons in an evening paper in Copenhagen. Now, that's all it takes to make enemies, you understand. And it seems to me that people who say let's not make enemies under these conditions are being flat out masochistic. Sure, we can avoid their ire, just as long as we're willing to destroy everything that makes our society different from theirs. Well, I'm not ready to do that. I'd rather fight it out, if it takes all my life. Okay? And I'll tell you how we'll know, which is when they start asking themselves, was it wise of us to piss off the Americans? Have we made too many American enemies? Have we stirred up the American street? That's what I want to hear them discussing. And I want to hear them discussing, can we go on taking these casualties? Because the Americans, we don't boast about it. But your fellow countrymen and mine are killing these people at the rate of hundreds a week, and willing to go on killing them at a higher rate, I hope. And at some point, they have to ask themselves, can we take it? That's the estimate I want to hear being made. I don't want to hear all this drivelling lamentation, where we've hardly started the business of training an army that knows how to fight these people and to defend our civilization in the most tough conditions of rogue and failed states. So, I have very little doubt of what Mr. Jefferson would say about that. But I don't feel I have the right to ventriloquize him on my side. Quite happy to speak for myself on the point.
There's a question about Bob Woodward. What do you think of Bob Woodward's new book about the Bush administration?
Not much. It's another piece of his seasonal stenography. This time from a different lot, he's channeling a different group within the administration. If you read the first book, I've written a long piece about this in the Atlantic, which you can look up, about the different styles in books of Bob Woodward and the various mutations it undergoes. But you can very easily tell who his sources are. For example, in the case of his first book, I can tell that George Tennet, then head of the Central Intelligence Agency, was a source because he's described as the hard-striving son of hard-scrabbling Greek immigrants. And he's also quoted quite a lot of the time in his own quote marks. Not all the quotes are blind, which is, by the way, how we know a very interesting thing about Mr. Tennet. which I'll share with you if you like. Do you remember what Tennet said when he saw the towers being hit? Do you remember this? It's in Woodward's book. It's worth looking it up. I mean, it's not a waste of time reading his stuff. You get some interesting material all the same if you can winnow it out. So Mr. Tennet is having breakfast with former Senator David Boren of Oklahoma, who had been his great patron on the Intelligence Committee for a while. And they're chatting on, and I'm willing to accept Tennet's word that's in the book that they were talking about the danger of Al-Qaeda. Maybe they were. It's not impossible. And then the men with the earpieces come piling into the room. They came running in. It's clear that our Director of Central Intelligence is not late for his next meeting. Something has happened. And they turn on the television and they see it. And so we know exactly what the first words said by any American intelligence official were in the first few moments of the post-9/11 era. And you know what the words were? Gee, I hope it's not those guys in the flight schools in the Midwest. Not quite good enough, is it? I mean, I can think why he would hope it wasn't them, because he was the only one who knew they were there. But he didn't think it was important enough to share the information with the FBI or to do anything about it. And I don't think he should have got a Medal of Freedom for that, I have to say. In fact, I don't think he should have been allowed to resign either. I think he should have been fired, and I think he should probably have been impeached. But I digress. I mean, in other words, you can find these nuggets in Woodward's book, but as you can see, tons of you must have read that book, but it's so boring you didn't notice that incredible confession. I get paid to read these books, unlike you, so I have more of an incentive.
Next question, is democracy possible in the Middle East where Islam is such an integral part of both the society and the government?
Well, I agree with Jefferson that there's something antithetical between religion and democracy in any case. And religion and enlightenment and the other things that you need for a democratic society, because I think that the principal thing is secularism, and it is a lot harder to convince Muslims, or can be a lot harder to convince Muslims of the importance of the secular for two reasons. One, they claim that their revelation, the revelation to their prophet, is the last and final and irreplaceable one. It completes all previous revelations. It cannot be altered. It cannot be improved. It's absolute, and no other books are required. No other guidance is needed than that. And that it's a total solution for every aspect of life, from the sexual to the dietary to the political to the economic. And the extreme form this takes is the desire to re-establish not a democracy, but an empire. There are some fools on the left who talk about Osama bin Laden and others as if they were anti-imperialists. Of course, they are fighting to create, in fact, more properly, to recreate a lost empire, the caliphate that was ended in 1918, and to bring, in theory, everyone in the world under its rule and the rule of Sharia. And that's as good a description as you could come up with for a totalitarian scheme, a totalitarian fantasy. So no, while this idea is abroad, it's going to be extremely difficult to impose democracy, which is why the first and most important priority is the destruction, physical destruction and discredit of the jihad movement. That has to be beaten and eradicated before any progress can be even discussed.